Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of Intuitive Angling, and much appreciated you guys checking today's video out and spending some of your time with me. And today, guys, I want to give you all a seminar and a tutorial on jig trailers, on how to set them up, the best ones, best colors, how to rig them, just how to choose them basically, because there's a lot of options. It's like you got, dozens of different type of jig trailers, and it's confusing to a lot of anglers out there that don't know a lot about jig fishing, or even if you do know a little bit about jig fishing. I'm going to give you guys some good tips that'll, I think, will really help you out over the next couple of years here. Also, guys, before we get started, just a couple quick things. Just want to remind everybody to please hit that subscribe button if you like the content here on Intuitive Angling. Much appreciated. We're really trying hard to get to that 100,050 subscriber mark. And also, guys, if you want to go to the next level on the channel, you can become a channel member or a Patreon member. All you have to do is go to my homepage, my YouTube homepage, and click on the little join button for info, or you can go into the channel description for all that information there. So I really appreciate that. Okay, we talk a lot. There's two things we talk about a lot on Intuitive Angling. One is jigs and one is jerk baits, because those are my two favorite lures. If you said, Randy, you can only have two lures to fish with the rest of your life, it would be a jig and a jerk bait. I love catching fish on them. They catch lots of fish, they catch quality fish, and they're just a lot of fun to fish. So a jig is one of the first lures I used to fish with. In fact, tell you a little story. I remember back in like 1978 and 1979, there was a little tackle store back in Joplin, Missouri called Southtown Bait, Southtown Sporting Goods. It was like one of those old time tackle stores where they had the minnow tanks in the back, and you could smell, it smelled fishy when you walked in there, and you could hear the minnow tank bubbling and smell the fish. And they had big bins of plastic worms, like flip tail worms. It was just such a great place. The floor was uneven. It was just really a lot of personality and character to the store. And they had jigs there on the wall. And there was the only jigs back then that they had were one called bass trapper jigs. They were live rubber jigs, and all they had was the black and brown. That's the only two colors they had. And I would buy those black or brown jigs and put a number 11, either a brown or black Uncle Josh pork frog on it. And that's how I learned to jig fish, with a black jig and pork frog at Table Rock Lake. So fast forward another 45 years, I've really been able to tweak and master jig fishing as an art form, which it really is. And, all of my Bassmaster wins that I've had, they came on jigs. All of my major tournament wins, except for one, have come on jigs. So I just love fishing them. So I'm going to sort of give you guys my opinion on what I think jigs, the best jig trailers are. Okay. Now, a lot of it, when you're trying to determine, it's like when you say, okay, Randy, I'm going fishing down at such and such lake, what jig trailer do I need to use? You don't really know, because one thing I found out about jig trailers, it's all about what the bass want the particular time that you're out there. And that can have things to do with like your water clarity, your water temperature, your water level, the size of bass you're fishing for, how deep the bass are, just a ton of different things out there. So you can get some confidence trailers, but ultimately you have to experiment. That's why when I go jig fishing, I have a lot of different trailers in the boat with me. I got a bunch of different colors and a bunch of different sizes just to mix it up and match it up. But what I want to do, I just sort of want to go over some of my favorites and sort of give you guys why I like them. Now, the first thing is, a lot of people, there's a big trend in jig fishing for people to use the curly-tailed flapping leg trailers, like the Rage Craw or the Speed Craw. A lot of younger anglers, and over the past 10 years, a lot of jig anglers in general have went to the flapping type leg trailers. I think the Pocket Craw was one of the first ones out there. But guys, I'm gonna tell you right off, as a jig fisherman that does it a long time, and I learned from the experts, I don't hardly ever use a flapping leg trailer. I much rather prefer the old style chunk type, non-flapping leg trailers for my jig trailers. I just think from my experience, I catch bigger fish and more fish on them. I got a lot of confidence in them. Now, occasionally I will use this. I mean, under some search situations we'll talk about in the video. But if I could give you one piece of jig fishing advice, stay away from the flapping leg trailers. A lot of you guys say, well, Randy, I rip them on a flapping leg trailer. That's probably because you're not using the other type of trailer. You're ripping them on it because that's what you're fishing. But I've experimented extensively I mean extensively with both styles. And for my determination, this chunk type trailer is the best trailer for a jig. So I just wanted to get that up there. Okay, now given that, the times that I will use some type of a flapping leg trailer like this, a lot of the times this type of trailer here, I'm using it on some type of a finesse jig. And usually what I'll do, like with the speed crawl, is I'll cut it in half and make it real short and compact, and then I'll cut my finesse jig back and fish it like that. That's one way I do it. The other time that I use this, it's the only trailer I do use, is for a swim jig. But this isn't really a swim jig video. Swim jig's sort of a different type of a jig category. But that being said, sometimes you're in a situation where you flip and pitch a jig and you swim a jig at the same time. I've done that too, where say for example, you're fishing, a place, a body of water has some mixed cover. You got a mix of docks, lily pads, lay down trees or whatever. If I have mixed shallow cover, sometimes I will use the flapping leg trailer because I may want to pitch that jig up into some lily pads and reel it like a swim jig with the, just under the surface, and I need that flapping trailer. And then I can take the same jig and pitch it under a dock or something. So occasionally I will do that, but not very much. My two favorite trailers of all time, aside from pork, I still do use pork under certain situations. And again, the pork is just an experimental thing. Most of the time when I use pork, it's in warmer, dirty water. A lot of people say, well, pork's good in cold water. That's a myth. Don't listen to that. Most all of the good fish I've caught on pork have come in warmer water in like the summertime or early fall. That's occasionally I will use pork in that situation, especially if the water's really dirty. But my two favorite trailers are the Zoom Big Salty Chunk and the Zoom Super Chunk. Big Salty Chunk and Super Chunk. These are my two favorite ones. And guys, I'll link all this stuff in the description of the video, including the link to my Blaukat throwback jig from Cumberland Pro Lures. They just got a bunch of these in at Tackle Warehouse. This is the ultimate pitching and flipping jig. Living rubber skirt, which is the best jig material because living rubber has a glow to it in the water that silicone doesn't. And these are hand-tied skirts, so they flare outboard. They're just a lot more realistic in the water. So definitely get you some of my throwback jigs. I'll link this in the description too if you want to pick some up. Okay, but given that, there's the two trailers that I use just right here. And how I determine these two trailers is there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's totally what the fish want at the time. So anytime I go jig fishing, I have one box full of Big Salty Chunks and I have another box full of Super Chunks. And I'll just see what the bass want. Now, given that, I do rig them a little bit differently. Sort of let me show what the deal is. With the Big Salty Chunk, it's pretty easy. You just thread them on. And first of all, another thing, guys, when you're rigging your trailers like this, like I'm going to show you, bite off a little bit there to make it where there's not quite so much plastic there. But that's how I set up the Big Salty Chunk like that. Just thread it on like a frog. Very simple. Now the Super Chunk, you can rig it two different ways. You can rig it just like that, a little bit longer, and it makes for a longer jig like that. Now this is if I want a really full big profile jig, this is how I set it up, and I rig the Super Chunk, just like a trailer on there. It makes the jig almost 5 or 6 inches long, so it's a big profile. This is the setup I use for heavy cover, or if I'm after some big ones, or a lake has a lot of big fish in it, I want a big full-size profile jig. But most of the time on the Super Chunk, I'm rigging it like this. I'll just thread it on a little bit. It makes for a little bit more of a compact look, and then at the same time, you still have, still got some bulk to it, but it just makes it a little bit shorter. And it's very similar to the Big Salty Chunk. It's just got the different type of leg on it. And then I will use occasionally, this is the Super Chunk Junior. This is a smaller version. Sometimes if I want a more of a compact jig, I can just take the Super Chunk Junior and I can thread it on, and it really makes the jig like 25% smaller if I do it like that. So if I want a nice little small profile, I'll put the Super Chunk Junior on there. I'll also use that Super Chunk Junior occasionally on a finesse jig, work pretty good. Now colors, it's pretty self-explanatory on the colors. If the water visibility has some stain to it, like if it's less than 2 foot of visibility, My color choices are usually some type of a blue or a black, black with blue flake in it, flipping blue on the big salty chunk. These are my two more off-colored stained watercolors. But most of the time, if the water visibility is over 2 foot, I'm using some type of a green pumpkin or a watermelon, just mixing it up with the different jig colors. And that can be for a completely different video, because matching your jig colors to the trailer color that you're using, there's a ton of information that goes with that, with a bunch of variables. But to simplify it, if you guys want to simplify your jig fishing and not make it real complicated, just get you these two styles right here: super chunk, big salty chunk. I'll link both of these in the description. And out of all the years that I've got jig fishing, there's not a trailer I haven't tried. I've tried about every trailer, and I use these right here, those two, probably at least 85% of the time. And the rest of the time I sort of mix it up with the curly legs and maybe pork frogs. Occasionally like a crawdad, like the old salt craw, works pretty good. But gotta just give the fish what they want. Just experiment with it. If you're getting a few bites on a jig, just keep experimenting. You might catch some bigger ones or more fish by changing to a different trailer. So anyway, guys, hope that helps you out, and we'll check in later and see you.